But he is the Professor Emeritus of Mathematics at Stanford University, a world-renowned mathematician. He has been a member of numerous boards committees, including the National Board of Education Science Reform and Act of 2002. Prior to the Common Core standards, he wrote math standards for several states, including California's, which were considered to be the highest in the nation. He served on the Common Core Validation Committee, as we've heard, and refused to sign off on the standards.
But I was on the validation committee for Common Core, and so was my colleague Sandra Stotsky. And the thing we have in common is that Common Core was a committee that was designed to oversee and validate the Common Core standards as they were developed. Validation means that you check the research behind every standard and say, though that research is not sufficient, get rid of it. Or you say, that research is solid, that stays. And we also had the right to interrupt the process and say, you know, you guys have left out a whole bunch of standards here, and here's the research that justifies them, add them. And they have to add them. So it was a pretty powerful committee. Is there a problem with? No. And you know, what I'm going to talk about is the internal history that of what actually happened on the validation committee during the process of preparing the Common Core. In fact, you'll see as I go along that the Common Core was never validated, that there were no pilots, there was no verification of the quality of these things, and the only research that really was relevant was research that showed the entire program at the high school level in geometry had been tried before and simply did not work. So this is the actuality, and I'm going to fill in some details during this little talk. So to start, I really get too many letters. I get an awful lot of letters from parents. And this is one that I picked out because it shows the situation that I see too often. So it starts out as everyone can see that? So, yeah. And so I was part of the group, well, a tiny bit of history, okay. I was part of the group of 4 Stanford mathematicians, that is me and 3 others, who actually wrote the old California standards, the one that were adopted in 1997 and disappeared from view in 2010. And people tell me that they were the one ranked set of mathematics standards in the country. And in any case, I did help write them. And as you can see, these parents are talking about at least one daughter, their 9th grade daughter, and she gets to stay with the program that we developed because she is currently in 9th grade in that school system. We can already see a huge difference in our 2 daughters' 7th grade experience. 2 years ago, our older daughter came home excited and engaged with her Algebra 1 in 7th grade, Algebra 1 7th grade class. Well, admittedly, these kids are apt to have been pretty bright. If they were a year early we'd set Algebra 1 as the 8th, and more and more kids were taking Algebra 1 in 7th by 2010, and evidently a little later than that. Unfortunately, in this school system, I can say it's Santa Barbara. This year, her younger a sister who came into 7th grade eager to be excited, is getting more and more bored. And to say nothing of the number of students who are getting more and more frustrated. So let's talk about the problems with Common Core. So as I pointed out a minute ago, the only quality control for Common Core rested in our hands, in the hands of the members of the Validation Committee. There were initially 23 of us, and it was increased by the end to 29. And of that group, virtually all of them, except for Sandy Stotsky and myself, were occupied with training teachers or otherwise doing teacher development or related things. The Sandy and I were the only members who had content background. Now, I was by default, because of that, I was the only PhD in a subject, in technical subject, not in an education area on the committee, and that would be mathematics, naturally. And Sandy had this incredible background of having produced the top-rated English language art standards in Massachusetts, and in rating, being an essential part of the development of our ELA standards in California, which also were ranked just about equal to the Massachusetts standards. So we are the two people that are going to talk to you about the validation committee tonight and what happened there. So let's see how it played out. So here's the charge to the validation committee, which I sketched out a minute ago. So validate the sufficiency of the evidence supporting each college and career readiness standard. And as I told you, we had the duty or the privilege or whatever you want to call it to add any standard that was not included in the document that we felt should be included and provide the evidence to support its inclusion. The last one, evidence that the standard is internationally comparable. It was desired, it was claimed to be desired, that these standards would be comparable, that is, benchmarked against and essentially the same as the standards in the high-achieving countries. And so we would match up to the countries that currently dramatically outperform us with the outcomes for their students. So evidently, in summary, Common Core was to be as good as the best international expectations, and in particular, it was for college and career readiness. And as I said, the standards were to match up with what is done internationally. So it is clear, as I stated, that the duties of validation were to oversee the development of the standards. Unfortunately, it's not true. It's not what happened. Not remotely what happened. So I'll describe to you now what actually happened. So back in September of 2009, we received the first draft of the Common Core standards to evaluate. And as you can see here, the first draft stopped with Algebra 1. That was it. There was no geometry, there was no Algebra 2, no trigonometry, no pre-calculus, no calculus, just Algebra 1. Well, let's go back to where we were. The intent and promise of Common Core was to prepare students for both the workforce and college. Well, just Algebra 1 does not begin to do this. Indeed, specifically, to my knowledge, no public four-year college or university in this country would even admit a student with just Algebra 1 as their background. I'll talk more about this later, but that situation was so unsatisfactory that I decided that I would have to discuss the issue with the lead writers of the standards and see if, just routinely say, this makes no sense, add in more standards, put in particular, put in a path that leads logically to calculus. But now, the two lead writers that participated, there were three. The third one never participated, but then he didn't have an advanced degree either. The two lead writers were both PhD mathematicians, and you know, they completely understood what I was saying, and they completely agreed, as we'll see later, but they couldn't do anything. They had been told what to write and at what level to write it. So it appeared specifically that I had to convince Achieve, one of the three organizations that were involved in the overseeing of the development of Common Core. I had to convince them that one needs more than Algebra 1 to be college and career ready, not the writers. This was my first hint that things were not as they had seemed. At any rate, I met with Achieve, as you would expect, demanding and almost rudely much more mathematics. And I showed them all sorts of data, and I explained to them what is done in the high-achieving countries. For what that's worth, let me tell you what is done in the high-achieving countries. Algebra 1 is a 7th grade class in the high-achieving countries. And finally, after much discussion, almost a full day of discussion, they allowed the writers to include some geometry and the material for a week Algebra 2 course, but that was it. That was it. I didn't know that was it. I thought I could still press on them to get the sequence so that there was at least a path to calculus. Now, I thought that it might be worthwhile to talk a little bit more about what actually happens in the high-achieving countries. And so there's a great misunderstanding among U.S. citizens about what's going on there. So what they typically say when I describe what happens with these kids and the level they achieve in high school, they're saying, oh, they're a very small part of the population. And they, you know, and it's very restricted to go to high school in these countries. No, the truth is that over 90% of the populations of these countries have a high school degree. Moreover, in at least half of these countries, a calculus course is required to graduate from high school. Okay, so this, I hope, gives you an idea of what the competition is. And we want to stop with Algebra 1. Well, I got them up to a week Algebra 2. Well, it turned out that was the last bit of luck we had. And then the powers behind the throne reacted. They were not happy with his intervention because almost immediately afterward, the members of the validation committee received a notice indicating that we no longer had any authority to make or even request changes in the standards. Instead, we were asked to sign a letter asserting that the standards were excellent. Well, I had a little trouble with it, so did Sandy Stotsky, and since the standards were far from being either excellent or even benchmarked to the level of typical international expectations, I refused to sign the letter. And Sandy did likewise, and here you were, the two experts in the two areas of development of Common Core, the ones in the content, I should emphasize. Both of us refused to agree that these standards made any sense. So for what it's worth, the lead writers, remember there were two mathematicians who were lead writers, and the third was a mister. And so what was the attitude of these two lead writers at the time? And you know, this was a time between my intervention and the final standards. And so we had two of them giving presentations in 2010 between January and June. And let me give you some quotes from them. I didn't see the videos being played here, unfortunately. Lots of good stuff like the Tom Lehrer thing got played, but not the video of their testimony. It seems that they both felt as I did, that the standards were woefully weak. Here's Bill McCullum's quote from January of 2010. He was the lead writer. It's not what we aspire to for our children. It's not what we as a nation want to set as a final deliverable. I completely agree with that, and we should go beyond that. Okay, it doesn't lend you a lot of confidence, does it? Okay, the second lead writer was Jason Zimba. And Dr. Zimba, testifying before the Massachusetts State Board of Education, elementary and secondary education. I've got Sandy in the audience, might as well get it right. Said as follows: the standards are for the colleges most kids go to, but not for the colleges most parents aspire to. Think about that for a minute. They are not for STEM, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math, and they are not for selective colleges. Well, that's a nice way of saying they are for community colleges and non-selective colleges and universities. Well, what are the non-selective colleges and universities? Basically, they're the for-profit colleges. So that's what the real focus was. That was the design. And then he went even further. He pointed out that what Common Core means when they say college ready is a student who passed Algebra 2. Which is kind of circular, since Algebra 2 is the highest course they give in the Common Core. It amounts to say, another way of saying, being college ready is what we say it is. So just out of curiosity, you might be wondering what the data shows about the nature of college expectations for students who stopped with an Algebra 2 class. So here's the determination of the odds for obtaining a four-year college degree versus the highest mathematics course completed in high school. And oh yes, there it is. A mathematician just has to do something like this. But let's see if I can get this to work. So you see, over here in this column and in this column are the odds. So over here, that's pre-calculus, and you look over here for the odds. The class of 1982, class of 1982, the odds of obtaining a college degree if your highest math course in high school was pre-calculus. What are they? I have to read them here. Was 75.9, 76%. And for the class of 1992, 10 years later, it was basically the same, 75%. But look at the numbers for Algebra 2. They're 46% in 1982 and only 39% in 1992. And the best estimates we have for current high school graduates is if they took their highest course being Algebra 2, they would have a 1 in 3 chance of ever obtaining a bachelor's degree in any subject at the university level. 1 in 3. Okay. The Common Core may define in any way they want what college readiness is, but a 1 in 3 chance of obtaining a college degree is not college readiness. The minimum here that makes sense is trigonometry, which at least is a 60% chance in 1992, and probably a 59 or 58% chance here. The important thing is at least half. So, and then while I think of it, there's one other thing. Down at the bottom here is Algebra 1. So look at the number here for Algebra 1. 7%. So the original document, the original definition of college ready, gave you a 7% chance of ever obtaining a college degree. I can try. Okay, so this is the reality of what they were doing. So at any rate, we've gotten through that, and now we can go back to a little simpler way of writing things down. And I've already discussed this, so we'll just skip it. Again, we're not done showing how weak this is, because this is degrees in any subject in college. What about the thing that when Obama gave this speech asserting that the federal government would stand behind the Common Core and donate, had created a program called Race to the Top with $4.3 billion, that part of the requirement for getting Race to the Top money for any state was to accept Common Core as their state standards. That the reason he gave at that point was that Common Core would strengthen the STEM pipeline. So let's look at the STEM pipeline. Let's look at getting the probabilities of getting a degree in STEM with this kind of preparation. So if a student with only Common Core preparation wishes to major in a STEM area, their odds of obtaining a degree in STEM are 2%. This is not a misprint. 2%, 1 in 50. I don't think that any rational person could think for a minute that this is in any way going to strengthen the STEM pipeline. Well, here's the data. As you can see, the data comes from the National Center for Educational Statistics, and the point where it is, sorry, they don't want me to leave the microphone here. It's right over here, in the second column at the bottom of that first block. And that's the intersection of the line that says students who complete a STEM degree, and it's in the column pre-college. Their first course in college was a pre-college course, a course below calculus or pre-calculus, and that's the position where they would be, 2%. So, okay. All right, just for the heck of it, let's put some blame out there, but it's always bad for me to do that, because when I do it, people attack me. So I'm going to quote people who were not me. In the words of a noted university professor of engineering, who happens to be female, without question, the fault is with the faculties of the schools of education who train these teachers rather than with the teachers themselves. Without a shred of evidence, the methods they train these teachers in these schools persist in pushing the worst possible teaching methodologies and denigrating basic skills. And what we're seeing here in Common Core is an example of what you do. I mean, in order to have a large number of kids reach the standard that is required for college readiness, they had to A, redefine the standard for college readiness, and B, they had to do some subtle things which I won't describe that presses on the public universities to lower the levels of their first-year math courses. So let me summarize. And again, this is sort of nasty, so I had to quote somebody else. So the somebody else, a noted education lawyer in Southern California, wrote as follows: anyone can write standards, but California, by law, requires current and confirmed research for standards. Now, we've already seen that there was essentially no research. What research there was actually that actually held water was an analysis of the geometry sequence that was put into Common Core, which had been used in the USSR, the old USSR, back in the late 70s and early 80s, but only for the most advanced students in the old USSR. It didn't survive 2 years. It had to be abandoned. The teachers had no idea what was being asked of them. They had no idea how to teach it. And there was so much rebellion that it went away almost immediately. That's the only research that we actually are sure of on the Common Core. As you can see, we were excluded from doing the study of these standards because, well, it was not of any use to do the study if all we were being asked to do was sign this dumb letter. Look, hey, none here. No confirmed research. Not even validation by the lone mathematician on the VC, whoever that was. No pilots, no research, no vetting, let alone anything resembling current and confirmed research. So that's what you've got, and that's the internal history of what actually happened on the validation committee, in particular focused on math. I think Professor Stutsky will talk about ELA.